Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. If you love jazz in its purest form, then our guest today on Another View is no stranger. Jae Sinnett and the Jae Sinnett Trio constantly top the jazz music charts, and Jae performs across the country and internationally, too. Or maybe you're a foodie and you follow Jae on Facebook with his show, Cooking with Jae. Into R&B? Then Friday nights are your night with the R&B Chronicles. As if he's not busy enough, Jae has a new project, and we'll tell you all about it next on Another View, right after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. I love sharing things that are happening in our community, so let me tell you about a couple of them that are going on that I think you will be interested in. First is Wellness in Full Bloom. Now, this is for women of all ages, and it's being sponsored by the Chesapeake, Virginia Beach alumni chapter of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated on Saturday, April the 27th. It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Place of Change, which is on Bainbridge Boulevard in Chesapeake. And they have several doctors and psychiatrists and OBGYNs and so forth to talk about various issues that women face with their health. Now, it is free and it is open to all women of all ages. And if you would like to attend, you can send an email to cvb.ppd@gmail.com. Include in that email your name and contact number, and they will get back to you to tell you how to register. But you do need to register in order to attend. That is next Saturday, April the 27th from 10 until 2. And then I hope you will join me in Virginia Beach with the Virginia Williams High School Career Association High School Career Forum. It also is on Saturday the 27th. It's from 11 until 1. It's for its students grades 9 through 12 and their parents. And it's an opportunity for high schoolers to learn about different career options after graduation. I will be talking about journalism. We have someone from Dominion Energy, from the Virginia Beach Technical and Career Education Center, an entrepreneur, the U.S. Coast Guard, South University. It's always a lot of fun. I hope you will come out. It's at the Myra E. Oberndorf Central Library on Virginia Beach Boulevard. So that is Saturday, April the 27th, 2024, from 11 until 1. To register, go to vwhsca.org. vwhsca.org. And finally, just want to remind you that we are so very, very proud of our very own Lisa Godley, the executive producer of Against the Current, which is a documentary that is coming up. It is going to air on Wednesday, April the 24th at 8 p.m. on WHRO TV 15. Tonight is the last pre-screening of the documentary, and it's in Virginia Beach, and it is sold out. As a matter of fact, it is oversold. So if you registered, get there early so you can get a seat. But it is a wonderful documentary. It's all about folks on the Eastern Shore and how they are dealing with climate change. And Lisa is the executive producer. It is WHRO's first national documentary, which means everybody across the country will be seeing it. And so we are so psyched about that. So our guest today is no stranger to regular listeners of WHRV FM or to jazz lovers everywhere. Jae Sinnett is a multifaceted individual with talents spanning music, culinary arts, nonprofit leadership, and more. Now, before we start our conversation, we do have to disclose that Jae Sinnett serves as the president of HR Jazz and holds the license for the 501c3 nonprofit organization. Jay, with everything else you got going on, now you got a nonprofit? Really?
Yeah, I know, Barbara. I know.
Tell us, what is HR Jazz?
Well, years ago, I used to be president of the Hampton Roads Jazz Society. And that was, decades ago. And it was an interesting opportunity for me to put together an organization that was all things jazz. Like, I was the first one to bring in Wynton Marsalis to this area.
Oh, wow.
Wynton's first band when he first signed with Columbia Records. I brought in Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Freddie Hubbard, Joe Henderson, John Hendricks, and I can go on and on and on. So it enabled us to do some very interesting things. With a nonprofit, you have financial benefits, and in terms of, you can get grant funding, people can make tax deductible donations, the whole thing. And then I became more involved in performing. So I got away from it, and several years have gone by. But performing, though, I was really learning. So there was a lot of practicing, a lot of studying, a lot of research. That was the beginning of my jazz career, really, as a performer. It's different now for me. So I'm already established. I can already play, right? Hopefully. And so, and people kept asking me to do something. What can we do for jazz? And there are organizations like Virginia Arts Festival. They have a jazz series. There's a jazz series down at Sandler Center. Yeah, there's people doing some good things for jazz, but there's no jazz organization, right? So I wanted to create. I made the decision after talking with several people, including dignitaries, mayors, city managers, the whole thing. And I produced the Phoebus Jazz Festival in Hampton. Well, technically Phoebus, but at the American Theater in 2019. We were getting ready to produce the second annual Phoebus Jazz Festival in 2020, and then Armageddon hit, right? Everybody knows about that. So everything got shut down. And since then, when things started getting better, people kept coming to me, Jay, are you going to bring back the Phoebus Jazz Festival? What are we going to do? So I decided, after many conversations, to form this organization, nonprofit, which is completely established now. I have my board established, and we have our first major event. It's a benefit fundraising event, April 26th, with a jazz icon who will be joining my trio, Branford Marsalis.
Oh, that's
Friday
fantastic.
After next, April 26th, at the Ferguson Center in Newport News. And it's a benefit to raise money for the organization.
But the organization,
so we can do things.
But the organization is more than, or I say more than, but it is more than bringing performances here. It's also about education, youth, etc. Right?
There's an educational component, but this is our first event. So to do anything, you need money, Barbara.
Sure,
you know
absolutely.
that. But for example, the young jazz ensemble from the Soundscapes organization, they're going to be performing.
Oh, that's
in the lobby, so people can hear him coming. People that are coming to the concert can hear these kids play. I'm going to offer tickets to some students in underserved communities that wouldn't have a chance to come out and see a show like this, to be around somebody like Branford Marsalis. I'm offer them tickets to come in. We, not me, the organization is going to offer tickets for these kids to come in and have that kind of experience, have that kind of exposure to this. And when kids can come in and see these kind of things and be around artists like Branford or myself, they can be inspired and motivated and made to believe that they can do something greater than what they're doing right now. And that's the whole point. And I have plans for, let's say, another example, high school band competition that will be adjudicated. We have judges that we can bring these kids in to have fun competitions, and we can adjudicate them. I'll bring in professionals to school them.
To actually do master classes,
clinics. At some point, when we bring in the artists that to perform, part of the requirement will be to go into either schools or to have master classes where these kids can come in and not just become better musicians, but better human beings. So there's a strong educational component to HR Jazz. And I invite people to go to hrjazz.org to see the website, to learn about the organization, and to come to this concert and hear some great jazz and support the organization.
And the other thing the organization is going to be doing also is working in terms of preserving the history, right?
Absolutely. And with April being Jazz History Month, you know, there's a lot of interesting history behind this, Barbara. See, jazz, there was a time in early FM radio where jazz can pop up on FM formats.
Okay.
It wasn't
Jazz
so unusual. Right. It wasn't so usual to hear Ella Fitzgerald, then Chicago, and then Jimi Hendrix, and then John Coltrane, and then Miles Davis. But then radio started, to change over the decades, and became very commercial. And jazz is an art music, man. It's an art music, and then there's smooth jazz, and smooth jazz has its organizations and has its benefits. But let me give you some history on smooth jazz, and this is a true story. There is a Chicago radio station, and there was an administrator that worked in the offices, and heard something and blurted out, "Oh, this sounds smooth, like smooth jazz," and it became a coined term. That's exactly how that term came into being.
Was it a jazz song they were listening to?
I have no idea what they were listening.
No idea what they were listening to.
But that was a term that somebody just blurted out. It wasn't made by a musician. It wasn't made by a jazz educator.
Wow.
It wasn't made by an artist. It was an administrator, and it became this thing that just happened to have jazz attached to it. And again, there are so many things. Smooth jazz has their own radio stations. They have their own formats. It became this genre.
So,
but jazz is different.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when I was doing the research, so originally jazz started out as dance music
But since we're on this show that deals with an African American perspective.
Sure.
Okay, here's some more history. I personally believe. Now, have I read about this? No, but I've had many discussions about this. Jazz was a dance music, and for black people, it was the Saturday night throwdown and the Sunday morning church service.
Exactly.
Right. That's you know me. We grew up in that environment.
That's right.
But I believe that there were certain artists like Thelonious Monk or Charles Mingus or Charlie Christian, Max Roach, Kenny Clark, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker. They saw white audiences going to theaters, sitting and listening to, let's say, symphonic performances or chamber concerts. They were sitting and listening and paying attention to what these artists were playing. They weren't jumping around dancing. It wasn't, I believe they wanted something like that for jazz. And the detachment start from the African American community, getting away from jazz, right? I think started at that point. Once jazz became it was evolving into a listening music with bebop. Right? The music became faster. It became more rhythmically syncopated. It became more harmonically challenging and interesting and intricate. So all of a sudden, it wasn't such an easy dance music. It was transitioning into a listening music. And because white audiences were already conditioned
to going
and sitting and listening, the African American culture, to a large degree, detached itself from jazz. And this is why smooth jazz has probably at least an 85% African American demographic listening to it because of its connection to R&B and the beat. You can dance; it's easy to dance to, but that's why jazz. If you look at jazz, the largest demographic of jazz listeners are white people listening to jazz. Now there is an African American community, of course, listening to jazz, but the percentages are dramatically different between smooth jazz and jazz.
What is it about jazz that grabbed you from the beginning?
Well, the first music I played professionally as a drummer was rock and roll. And I played R&B, and I played soul, and I played funk and all that coming out of the 60s into the 70s when I was in high school. And when I started my military career, I didn't play. But then I auditioned.
You didn't play for the military band?
I did not. I auditioned. but they laughed at me.
Uh-oh.
That's another story, because I had all these kids in high school telling me that didn't know anything about music, telling me how great I was. But it changed my life, though. It was a great experience. That embarrassing encounter changed my life. I auditioned, didn't pass, but when I got out of the Navy, I started playing in the dance bands, but I got tired as a drummer. I got tired of the repetition. I said, man, there has to be something else I can play on this instrument outside of boom, zoop, 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 these beats.
So the beats were pretty much the same, no matter what the song was, right?
Disco.
Yeah. Yes,
it was
absolutely.
Disco. And I got turned. I had already heard jazz. I've heard jazz, growing up, throughout the 60s with my family. My mother would play jazz, or my grandmother would play jazz, but mostly gospel. Right. But I was exposed to it. So it wasn't so unusual to me when I heard it, but trying to play it, now that was a whole different situation. So I started practicing and studying jazz in the late 70s. And then finally made that transition into playing jazz. And as a drummer, wow, there's no more. Jazz was the first music to use the drum set.
Wow.
See, up until jazz and the drum set, the percussion parts of a band were components. You had one person playing bass drum, one person playing snare, one person playing cymbal, and so forth, miscellaneous percussion. At some point, somebody said, well, we're going to have one person, we're going to drive one person crazy and have them play all the parts, right? And that was the evolution of the drum set. But jazz was the first music to use the drum set. So any other genre of music can thank jazz for having that drum set.
So what do you think, and do you think that HR Jazz will also focus on trying to bring the African American community back to its roots, if you will, because that's where jazz started, and I wonder, do you think that will change as time goes on?
I hope so. I mean, that's planned. Those are plans. I mean, I have plans for bringing people in to talk about this in master classes and lectures. I have in our teachings, we want kids to be familiar with this history and recognize this history. Of course, there are obviously great white jazz musicians, but there's a tremendous history that's rooted in African American culture and jazz that a lot of kids aren't familiar with.
Ella Fitzgerald from right here in Newport News. Yeah.
I just played the Max Roach Festival down this past weekend down in Elizabeth City because Max was born in North Carolina. But it's that history. But what they were doing and the discussions and the classes and the clinics, they were talking about this great man. But when you talk about Max, you're obviously you can't just talk about Max. You have to talk about what Max was doing, his environment. So kids were hearing this story, about this history and who he played with and how it evolved to what it did. So that history is profoundly important. And I tell people, the tree has to have roots. It doesn't start with the leaves, right? You tell these kids, you got to go back and really research his history. So HR Jazz will be involved in doing a lot of things that are educational based, historical based, and performance based.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have for Jae Sinnett, who is a percussionist? He is a leader of a nonprofit. He's a foodie. We could go on and on and on and on and on.
Sometimes I wonder how I do it,
When you travel around the country and you tune into other public radio stations and so forth, is there a Sinnett in Session type show, or are you one of the only that are still doing full jazz?
No, there are several great broadcasters out there. Brad Stone, Arturo Gomez. I mean, I can go on and on with. Now, I will say what's different with what I present in my show versus what a lot of other jazz programmers do. I'll play a lot of things they won't play.
So
now,
what do you mean?
There's been this research in radio over the years, through NPR and other businesses that have conducted these
research studies,
right? What they're listening to. Some of the research, I remember years ago, they're saying, well, the research says that people don't like scat singing. So then that wipes out Ella Fitzgerald.
Wow.
Oh, they don't like the big band. People don't like the big band. Oh, well, that wipes out Count Basie and Duke Ellington and a host of others. Oh, they don't like drum solos, or they don't like bass solos. There are still radio programs that will not play drum solos or bass solos.
Wow.
And one of the first things people
next up, Jae
when they
Sinnett
get my record, well, where are the drum solos? But being a programmer, I know this. And so when a lot of musicians come to me and talk to me about, well, Jay, I want to do a record, what would you recommend? And I'll say, do not open your record with a drum solo. They won't even make it to track 2. There will be no listen to track 2, right? You have to strategically place these things if you want airplay, okay? If you and I tell artists, you know what, to sleep better at night, do the record the way you want to do it.
Because you still have to be true to yourself.
You got to be true to yourself.
In terms of music.
I said, if you don't get jazz radio airplay, it's not going to make or break your career. But you'll sleep better if you know you did it the way you wanted to do it.
Jay, what is it that people don't understand about jazz?
Well, I think there are a few areas. It's primarily instrumental, for starters. Jazz is swung, so the rhythm of jazz is different than anything else they will listen to. Rock, classical, bluegrass, any other genre of music they listen to doesn't have that focus on the swing rhythm like jazz does. So you have the instrumental part of it. You have the way the rhythm is felt, the way the rhythm is felt, the way the music is played. Then you have the improvisation. Like people will hear the melody. They can hum along with the melody. And now what happens after the melody starts? Then you have the improvisation. So it's that people get lost with the improvisation. And I tell people, jazz is not a music that you have to understand. You just have, it's kind of like...
You got to feel it.
It's kind of like you listening to a language that you love the inflection, like French or Italian or something like that. You don't have to understand what they're saying,
right?
But you can appreciate the inflection. But you have to learn to appreciate the inflection. So it takes patience and just a different kind of listening. That's all.
Wow.
When I first heard jazz, I was a musician. Somebody turned it on to me, and I'm like, man, that kind of sounds like a cat and a dog in a garbage can. I don't know what that is.
It's really interesting because there are notes that sometimes when I'm listening to jazz and I go, that's off. Like,
well,
but it's not off. I mean, it's just a different type of harmony.
And it's just a matter of what your ear is conditioned to hearing. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just might be different to you, and it might sound so different to you that it sounds wrong. But that's only based on how you are used to listening
to music.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're listening to Morning, right, on your CD Commitment, Jae Sinnett 0 to 60 Quartet, and this song has been on the charts for over a year, the longest.
The album. The
album.
CD. Yeah.
The album. Okay.
I said album, yeah.
Yep, the CD. Okay. So it remains in the top 52, the most played in 2023, and it's in heavy rotation on Sirius XM.
Sirius Real Jazz XM. Yeah.
There you go. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, and this song here was written by a wonderful pianist and composer named Claire Fisher. Claire Fisher, he wrote this. Okay. So we did some standards on here in addition to our music.
Sounds good. Let it play a little bit. So I do have to ask you a question and it kind of reminds me of the symphony. When people go to the symphony and they don't know when to clap. when you're at a jazz concert and someone has just done their improvisation,
right?
Is that the time, and is it okay if you go crazy?
That's when you applaud, right? Yeah. It's kind of.
I mean, there's jazz etiquette. Right?
It's jazz etiquette and protocol. That's what you do, and you don't talk during the performance, and that's one of the disadvantages about jazz in a nightclub. You mix alcohol with the situation. At some point, it's not going to play out well for the musicians, right? But you listen, and after they play their solos, you applaud. And then you stop and you wait for the next person to play, and then you applaud after the song is over again. Obviously.
Okay. Now, what? Well, let me do this first, and then we'll come back because I want to ask you about the synchronization of the musicians when you guys are playing. But if you're just joining us, we're talking with jazz artist Jae Sinnett about his newest project, hrjazz.org. In full disclosure, Jae serves as president of HR Jazz and holds the license for the 501c3 nonprofit organization. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Randy joins us from Hampton. Hi, Randy, you're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, Jay.
Mr. Gilliland.
I'm interested in what impact and opportunities HR Jazz offers to a younger generation. Jazz is sort of seen as a older generation genre, but I'd like to know what you think about the impact on HR Jazz will have on a younger generation.
That is a great question. And Randy, just in full disclosure, you are one of the board members. Am I correct in that, Randy Gillian?
That's true.
I want to ask you a quick question before Jay answers your question. What drove you to say, yes, I'll get involved in this because it's important to bring jazz to Hampton Roads in this format?
Jay told a compelling story and vision for the organization. And, I'm a fan of jazz and Jay's show. But the idea of putting on performances, the Phoebus Jazz Festival again and other festivals around the region, and the educational component was really compelling to me.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, I'm going to let Jay answer your question. Thanks so much. And Randy is the Director of Philanthropy with the Equal Justice America. Go ahead.
Thanks, Randy. It's good to hear from you, my man. I know, and I hope you're doing well on the mend. I know you were dealing with some health issues, so we're all hoping that you're on the mend there, buddy. Great question, though. When you look at the age demographic with jazz, it's an older demographic. It's an older demographic, and there is a younger audience that I believe is curious about jazz, but they don't have any or many outlets where they can go and be informed, be educated with the music. And so that was another element of why I wanted to have this educational component to HR Jazz, because we're not going to just do it for musicians. I mean, there will be, like I used to teach jazz history classes here at WHRO and HRV, and I want to get back into doing that. But I want them as part of HR Jazz, right? And bring the community in, because I think there's a lot of curiosity about jazz inside the community, but people don't know where to go to get the information. I was fortunate, Barbara, when I first heard jazz, I told you it was like a little awkward to me, particularly when I was trying to learn how to play it. I had people sit me down and say, okay, there's a method to the madness. This is how this works. This is the role of the instruments in jazz. This is how this works. So I had somebody teaching me in fairly simple terms. So that's important for non-musicians to have somebody that can articulate these things to them, or that we could bring more people into this great music.
Now, you taught at the Governor's School for the Arts also, right?
I did for almost 12 years.
And those students, what would they tell you was their reasoning for wanting to play jazz and to be in jazz? And do they continue from Governor's School? Do they continue on?
A lot of them do.
Some of them from.
A lot of my students did. I know Billy Williams Jr., fantastic drummer, Justin Coughlin, a sensational pianist, and many, many more. But there are others that go into different fields. They give it up. But I think most of the kids that come into jazz, they're curious. See, when you get into symphonic music, they hand you the music, and that's basically your job. You have to be able to play this music and sight read this music and play it the way the composer intends for that music to be played. And that's not a right or wrong thing or good or bad thing. That's just the nature. What it is. This is what it is, right? Jazz, you have that too. You can get the sheet music. You have to read some things, a lot of things sometimes. There's a myth that jazz musicians don't have to read music. Well, no, you don't. But your ears better be in a place that are just phenomenal, and what you're able to interpret what you hear. But you want to read music, though. They're curious about it. They love the fact that there's music with improvisation because they can create and be themselves and create and use their own ideas. That's the beauty of jazz. It gives you the opportunity as a musician, as an instrumentalist or vocalist, to establish your voice in defining a sound that's identifiable to you. You see what I mean? So it's really about really creating art on your terms. Now, when you're with a group, obviously you have to be in the group setting and work to the group, but the music is still letting you and challenging you to define your sound and who you are. I think that's what brings these kids to this music.
So when you are with your trio, you guys have been together for so long that I'm sure you kind of know each other and can feel each other as you're playing. But a lot of times I've been to jazz concerts where there might be an artist in the audience, and you guys say, "Come on up," and you start jamming. But what are you looking for? What are you listening to? How are you guys blending? Especially when you're going from improvisation to improvisation. How do you know when it's over and when the next one is coming up?
Well, sometimes you want it to be over, but it's really it's a conversation. It's an interesting kind of musical democracy where we're up there working together, listening to each other, feeding off of each other, fueling and motivating each other. It's really this very intricate, complex way of communicating that when the person is playing the solo, let's say we have a saxophone player, which I do in my quartet, right? The saxophone player is playing the solo. So what are the other three of us doing? We're listening to that person play the saxophone solo, right? We are comping with them, meaning we are supporting them with the ideas. We keep fueling that foundation. My job is to keep great time. My job is to swing. Well, all their job is to swing, not just one person. The whole band has to swing. But it's about creating a really feel-good foundation for the solos. And then same with the piano player. Then me and the bass player, we have to establish that feel-good foundation, because what we play either distracts them or motivates them and inspires them. Right? So it's kind of like acting. If you're on stage and you are engaged in a one-on-one character, these two characters, right? And you're trying to establish a certain kind of mood, a certain kind of vibe. It could be one of tension, it could be one of love, it could be you still need two people to make that part work. Yeah. And there's no difference in how we play this music. There can't be a weak link.
So how do you decide who goes first?
Oftentimes it's a visual thing. Rarely will I say, when we get ready to wrap up the melody, somebody will look around and we'll just go, you got it, point. And then that person starts playing their solo. So you got to be able to play, in other words, before you get on that stage.
I was going to say that takes a lot.
Yeah, you got the talent has to be there once you step on that stage.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What questions do you have for Jae about jazz? Are you a jazz listener? And if you're not, what would make you come to the table? Because that's what the organization HR Jazz wants to do, bring you to the table.
When I announced that Branford Marsalis was coming, here's a question that so many people have asked me that it's kind of a little bit offensive to me, actually. Well, how did you manage that? How did you manage to get him? Why is he coming up to play with you?
You know what, Jay? I think, and I hear what you're saying. I think that people are so comfortable with you and see you here, and they don't experience you as the national and internationally known musician that you are. I mean, and I'm not blowing smoke here. I'm very serious. Right. I've been in the car driving places and listening to jazz, and they go, Jae Sinnett Trio, and I go, oh, because we have that relationship and that familiarity that I think people don't realize just how accomplished.
Well, first of all, there's history with Branford, and because like I said, I was the first one to bring Wynton Marsalis to this area, to a venue called the Judges Chambers, which used to be in downtown Norfolk, decades ago. And Branford
That was
in
before
Winton's
my
band
time here.
at the time. And then Branford and I, we met, we became friends, and I brought him back. I played with him years ago before he became a big star, before the Tonight Show, before Sting, and all these things. But I think most importantly with Branford and Winton, with me, I became really close to their father. And I miss that brother, man, for real. Ellis was, I had the opportunity to tour with him twice. Matter of fact, he did his last performances. Wow. I played his last performances with him before he died. And he and I just developed this very interesting relationship. I can remember Ellis and I driving somewhere down to North Carolina or someplace, and Branford would call, and Ellis would say, "Yeah, I'm here in the car with Jae Sinnett. Jay got me in a cotton field down here in North Carolina." Yeah, I mean, just making jokes, you know. And I think Branford really appreciated that because they're so busy. Winton and Branford are so busy. But to see the kind of relationship that Ellis and I were having, and the friendship that he and I developed up to the time that he died. Ellis and I was talking with him about doing certain projects that I wanted to be a part of and help him with. So we were talking about things, and I had just talked to him about doing a ballad record, because at that point in his life, he didn't have the technical facility that he used to have. He was in his 80s, he had some health issues. But the way he played ballads, I pleaded. I said, "Ellis, let's do a ballad record, man. Please let me produce it." And he was like, "Well, that's interesting. That's interesting." And we started to talk about this, and like 3-4 weeks later, he was gone. COVID took him out, man.
Wow.
But I think the relationship I have with that family, I think for Branford to get on a plane, leave New Orleans, to come up here and play with Jae Sinnett. Number one, he's doing that because, first and foremost, we can play, okay? He respects our musicianship. Secondly, he believes in the cause and the mission of what I'm trying to do with Hampton Roads Jazz Incorporated. He believes in that mission, and he wants to come up there and he wants to help and participate. I told him, I said at the outlet, I said, "I don't have Branford Marsalis money." Okay. He said, "It's a benefit, right?" He said, "To help this organization." I said, "Absolutely." He said, "I'm in. Count me in."
Oh, that was fantastic.
So
tell people again when the concert is and how they can get tickets.
The concert is Friday, April 26th at the Ferguson Center. We are already 3/4 sold out.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
And you can get your tickets at fergusoncenter.org. And if this is intriguing to you, guys, if we stroked your curiosity, do not wait to get your tickets, because we believe it's going to be my goal objective right now where we are in ticket sales is to sell at least 75 more tickets, and we would reach our goal objective, and we're going to get there. But don't wait to get your tickets, okay? fergusoncenter.org.
And the concert starts at 7:30?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
At the Ferguson Center, Newport News, fergusoncenter.org. You can get your tickets. And I think there are a few seats left on the floor, and then there's the balcony. You can get tickets for the balcony as well.
Okay. 757-440.
And it's to raise money for the organization.
Of course.
Sorry.
2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about HR Jazz and how you would like to get involved. We have a question on Facebook from Lynn in Chesapeake. She says, "What jazz musician has inspired or influenced you the most, and why?"
There's so many. I mean, but for different reasons, right?
Okay.
Let's take Duke Ellington, for example. Duke Ellington's class, the way he dressed, the way he presented himself, what he expected of his band members. And when you consider the societal mechanisms of the time he existed in, which were radically different than today, the things that he had to deal with, with a manager that insisted or demanded to have his name along Duke Ellington as co-writer of these songs when he didn't write anything, I mean, things like that. But to maintain that class, man, to maintain that level of sophistication when you had those really sickening societal mechanisms to deal with. So to rise above that, those are a few of the things, for example, that I like from Duke Ellington. Or John Coltrane, his obsession with practicing, right? People say, well, man, how's Coltrane that good? Well, he practiced relentlessly. He would play a gig, a 3-4 hour gig, go back to his hotel and play and play and play in his hotel room, falling asleep with his lips bleeding, with the horn still in his mouth. So it's that obsession. That was the title of my very first album back in 1985, Obsession. It was about that, or Max Roach, drummer. I was honored to be a part of that festival this past weekend down in North Carolina. Max's innovation on the instrument. He was the first one to really imply drum set composition into a solo drum set context. So I love Sarah Vaughan. The sassy one, her singing, oh man, I just listen to that woman sing all day and night. Her range, her pacing, her pitch, all these things. So there are a host of other musicians that I like and respect and learn from for different reasons.
If you could sit down with, I know that you have a bunch of different people, but if you could sit down with one person and just pick their brain for everything you wanted to know about jazz, is there one particular one that rises above?
That's alive?
Yeah. Not alive or dead?
Alive, well, dead, yeah. I can think of several. But I would have loved to have just a one-on-one timeless conversation with Wayne Shorter, saxophonist Wayne Shorter. I had the chance to speak with Wayne, but it was more or less in passing, so I didn't really get a chance to really. I had the chance to interview Herbie Hancock for my show a couple of times, and I remember, I can't remember exactly the question, but all I heard was the manager telling me, well, you're only going to get 10 or 15 minutes with Herbie. You're only going to get 10 or 15. Then they will call me 2 days later. Just a reminder, you're only going to get 10. I'm like, okay, I got it. 10, 15. So I put together 3 or 4 questions.
Right.
That I can get Herbie to, the answer in 10 minutes, right? And I remember the second question I asked Herbie, I said, Herbie, when you were in the Miles Davis situation in the mid-'60s with Ron Carter, Tony Williams, Wayne Shorter, and Miles, of course, Tony's cymbal beat, was really clearly defined way on top of the beat. And his use of independence between his hi-hat and how he punched used the bass drum, the accent with Ron Carter was playing in your chordal accompaniment, blah, 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 blah. And there was this long pause. And Herbie was in his hotel room, right? And he goes, wait a minute, I got to sit up here. And you can hear the bed squeaking, and he was sitting up and he goes, ask me that question again. So I asked him that question. That interview ended up being 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Wow.
Because
he knew that you knew
I
what you
knew
were
how
talking
to
about.
connect to him, right? So much for that 10 or 15 minute window.
Let's see, I want to get this name right. Letus, I believe it is, in Virginia Beach.
It's Leotis, and I.
Oh, Leotis, thank you.
Yeah. I come from LA, and I remember back in the day being able to go to jazz clubs, Birdland West, at the Lighthouse, Concerts by the Sea.
Oh yeah.
And they had a number of jazz commentators, Chuck Niles, Jay Rich, and when I moved here over 30 years ago, I was lost. I was at a loss because I didn't have any jazz places to go to, but there was a few that opened and then they closed. And I'm really disappointed with that, but I listen to Jae Sinnett occasionally when I'm in the car and really love that people love jazz. There's still people that love jazz and still promote it.
Okay, thanks so much for the call, Leotis. I got that right this time. Absolutely. At some point, I shouldn't even say this because you got so many things on your plate. But would you envision HR Jazz expanding into a club?
That gave me the chills, Barbara. Honestly, I would say right now, no.
Okay.
No, but I envision, the organization growing, and we can have our own office facility and just I ultimately, in addition to producing, by the way, it's confirmed we're going to bring back the second annual Phoebus Jazz Festival.
Oh.
The September looks like right now the dates are going to be September 27th, 28th, and maybe the 29th, but definitely a 2-day festival. And I will start booking for that. But the other part of this is too, I want to start the Hampton Roads Jazz Inc. Jazz Series. I want to start having a jazz series. And when I decided to name the organization Hampton Roads Jazz, because I want to do things in all 7 cities. So all the city dignitaries that are listening right now, you're going to be talking to me at some point, because we want to bring some jazz into your communities. We want to reach these underserved kids in your communities.
So what do you say to somebody who may be saying, well, we already have jazz series and we already have jazz
you don't have enough
coming.
of it. That's my answer. You don't have enough of it, and you need more of it.
Yeah.
Because it makes people feel good when it's done right. And so when you say, well, you already have jazz, what 2-3 events a year or something like that? No. See, we want to do something more serious than that.
Tell me about the composition of the Max Roach event this past weekend. It was at Elizabeth City State, but who was there?
Well, they had several of the jazz directors from several universities in North Carolina, and some of which I knew, like Todd Wright from Appalachian State up in Boone, and Thomas Taylor, a fantastic percussionist out of North Carolina Central. So they had a faculty ensemble, right, that came in and taught about Max, and then they played to honor Max. And I played with an interesting group from this area, the Latin Jazz Conspiracy. And when Douglas Jackson, who was the jazz head down at Elizabeth City State University, asked me to participate in this event, and when he said, Jay, I want you to play as a guest with the Latin Jazz Conspiracy, I'm thinking, Max Roach, Latin jazz. I mean, where's that connection there? But he had a vision, though. He heard Max more expansive than I did at the time, just in a different way. He said, well, Max wouldn't frown at this. Max would love this and embrace this, So I thought he made me think about it differently. And I played with these guys, and when I go back and I listen to that show, it was fantastic.
Wow,
and the audience loved it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So then there were several different groups on the show.
Were there. And who was the audience? Could anybody come?
Anybody can come in the community. Yeah, they had the shows in 2 different places down there. Okay,
Al joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Al. You on the air?
Hello, how you doing?
Okay.
Thanks, Alvin. I just want to add, I've been familiar with jazz all my life, but just recently I kind of realized how important jazz is, and a lot of black people don't realize that. And I just found out about bossa nova music. You familiar with that, right?
Of course.
Okay, but I just found out, Jay, that bossa nova consists of Latin music and jazz music.
Absolutely.
That's right. So I didn't, all these years,
I love it.
I didn't realize it. Yeah.
Alvin, I love how excited you are about it. That's what I'm hearing in your voice.
Right, because it's just something that I found out recently. And another thing, a lot of people don't realize, during Hitler's time with the wall and all that hating, a lot of Germans were listening to jazz music.
Okay.
Well, the bossa nova got a huge American boost in the early '60s, of course, with Charlie Bird and Stan Getz when they were emerging bossa nova, the Brazilian concepts with jazz. They were the first ones to really bring that out to a major American audience. But as far as Latin jazz, you got to look at Dizzy Gillespie. As far as the American musicians that really brought the Latino side to jazz and merged that back starting in the '40s. That kicking. But bossa nova, which is Brazilian, more Brazilian, that really got its a strong American introduction in the early '60s.
Well, we only got about 4 minutes left, so we got to talk a little bit about
food. Been a lot of fun, Barbara. I love doing this show with you.
Thank you. So a couple of recipes, because I promised folks you were going to tell them something for the summer. And you've got this cookbook, Cooking Freestyle with Jae Sinnett?
Yeah. This was a book that was... Well, it's a magazine. It's not a book. Okay, but it was put together several years ago as a fundraising premium back then. And, wanted to share some of my recipes in here. All right, which one do you want me to talk about? Is there one in particular?
That the andouille sausage black eyed pea stew. I went.
You want to hear something? You want to hear something funny? I absolutely hate black eyed peas.
So you can cook things that you don't like to eat yourself.
I cook the heck out of this black-eyed pea andouille sausage stew.
Yeah.
But I won't eat the black-eyed peas.
But you won't eat.
No, I'll taste the sauce. The sauce is what's important, right? Not the black-eyed peas. The black-eyed peas are going to taste the same in anything you put them in.
Okay, let me ask you though, seriously, the Jazzy J's andouille sausage mac and cheese. Let's do that one. Tell me.
It's
potato salad. Never mind.
See, the mac and cheese. It's a twist. You know, it's classic mac and cheese, but I use a couple of different cheeses: Gruyere cheese and cheddar, sharp cheddar. But the twist is getting some really good quality andouille sausage to bring some of that heat. Some of that heat in there, you know, so it becomes almost like a casserole of sorts.
I was going to say that's a meal
when you put the sausage in there. But that and mac and cheese with the andouille sausage, the right kind now of andouille sausage, right? You're going to have yourself a delicious dish. And then there's the one dessert. I love creme brulee.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, and there's one creme brulee dessert. It's my white chocolate butterscotch schnapps creme brulee. Now, you know, with the egg yolks and the sugar and the cream. Now, you can use different. I also make a black raspberry chambord creme brulee, a peanut butter creme brulee, butterscotch white chocolate creme brulee. The key for me with creme brulee, outside of the flavor, the texture.
Yes, because
texture.
It's got to be that custody.
It has to be smooth as China silk. You know?
With the right crust
with
on the top.
With that brown sugar crispiness right on top. Yes, got to be.
So what's the key to getting there?
How you cook your eggs and your sugar, right? And how you heat the cream, right? With the sugar. So you split the sugar up, but once you bring the cream to a light boil, but you have to let it cool, okay, before you put it into eggs. Otherwise, you'll cook your eggs. So when you put it in with your eggs, you get a nice creamy mixture. Then you strain. Get the smallest strainer you have, right, and pour that liquid through that strainer, and it's so smooth. Then you get the little creme brulee cups.
Yeah. You
bake it in water, right? You have the water come up halfway up the creme brulee cups. Bake it at about 350 for about 50 minutes or so. Then remove them, let them cool, right? Put them in a refrigerator for a few hours. Then you get some brown sugar, light brown sugar, evenly spread across the top. You can use a creme brulee torch or the broiler. If you use the broiler, just 2 minutes.
Just pop it in there.
Yeah, pop it in. Take it out, cool it, put it back in the refrigerator because you want that custard to really firm up.
Wow. We got 1 minute left. Can you believe that? Tell us about the concert one more time.
Oh, HR Jazz. I so want you folks to really dig this organization. It's Hampton Roads Jazz Incorporated. The website is hrjazz.org. Check it out. See how you can support us. You can support us by coming to this concert. The concert, my trio with special guest jazz icon Branford Marsalis, April 26th at the Ferguson Center, Newport News. Tickets are available at the Ferguson Center at fergusoncenter.org.
Okay.
And hope to see you there. It's a benefit to raise money for the organization.
Thank you, Jay,
Barbara,
for being with us always.
Thank you.
And we hope that you've enjoyed this edition of Another View. Check out this show again or any of our Another View programs at anotherviewradio.org, on Spotify, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. Next week on Another View, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby and Another View on Health. And we're going to be
also
talking
on the board.
Yes, he is. And we're going to be talking about healthcare insurance and what you need to consider as you're trying to pick out a plan for you. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jae Sinnett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Hey, guess what? Tuesday was Lisa's birthday. Happy birthday, Lisa. We love you. Everyone, do something good for someone you love this weekend. It'll make you feel great. And let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.